Meanwhile, in the backyard, a gorgeous woman sat gracefully on the arched bridge over the pond, her gaze fixed on the fish swimming in the water. Her feet dangled in the air, and her toes would occasionally break the water's surface. Bathed in warm sunlight, she resembled a fairy, taking one's breath away effortlessly. Even the colorful blossoms in the garden paled in comparison to her. There was a splash as the woman flung a handful of fish feed into the pond. Instantly, thousands of fish swarmed near her and thrashed around, splashing water everywhere. The colorful fish painted a gorgeous painting as they fought for good. "I envy you, fish. You can live without worrying about anything, unlike me who can't even decide what I like." The woman sighed, her expression turning sad. "Who said you can't?" A familiar voice rang out behind her. The woman froze before laughing at herself. "I'm even beginning to hallucinate in broad daylight now." "Hallucinate? It's not that serious, is it?" The voice rang out again. This time, the woman froze and slowly turned around to see a man step into the rays of sunlight and approach her. The person was none other than Dustin. "What are you doing here?" Natasha was so elated to see the person she had been missing dearly that she even doubted her eyes. She had been confined in her room for some time now, the isolation nearly throwing her into depression. "Didn't I say I'd come to look for you in Millsburg if you don't return to Swinton? I'm keeping my promise right now." Dustin smiled softly. "You're the best, dear." Smiling sweetly, Natasha forgot about the fish feed and threw herself into his arms. Looking as happy as the fish in the pond, Dustin finally felt his nervousness dissipate as he inhaled her familiar scent. He'd been worried ever since Natasha left Swinton, his worry only growing when he learned that she was going to marry Tyler. Now that he finally got to see her, he felt much calmer. "Ahem. Mind your manners," an unhappy voice lectured from behind them. The two turned around to see a middle-aged woman standing behind Ruth. "Mrs. Davies, I wish to talk to my friend. You may leave us." Natasha waved her away. "I'm sorry, Ms. Natasha. Mr. Harmon told me to keep an eye on the two of you." Mrs. Davies shook her head. "Chimpate, why is that stubborn old man being so cautious? Does he think we're going to elope?" Natasha huffed. Mrs. Davies lowered her head without replying. Knowing Natasha's temper, eloping did sound like something she might do. With the family gathering right around the corner, Mrs. Davies couldn't let something like that happen. "Fine. You can stay." Natasha wasn't in the mood to argue, so she dragged Dustin over to the gazebo over the pond. Mrs. Davies was just about to follow them when Ruth stopped her. "My dad only said to keep an eye on them, not stalk them. Why would you impede on a couple's private conversation?" Mrs. Davies thought about it for a moment and decided to wait where she was. After all, the two of them were still within her sights, and she could see every move they made. "How did you get in here, dear? My father isn't the type of person who would give in easily," Natasha asked, pouring 2 cups of tea. "I saved his life, so I asked to meet you in return." Dustin gave her a rundown of everything that had happened. After hearing the story, Natasha grumbled. "What a reckless old man. That's why I came to talk to you." "What should we do?" Dustin asked helplessly. "I've been thinking about this too. There are only 2 ways to stop this wedding. We either change my father's mind, or we force the Grant family the annulment first." Natasha pondered for a second before pointing out to propose. "My father's too stubborn. He's even willing to die for the family, so it'll be too difficult to persuade him unless we can get rid of his worries." "What worries?" Dustin asked, curious. Natasha sighed. "Years ago, our family offended someone called the Dark Lord. He's a ruthless and evil person who uses despicably cruel methods. He's been tormenting our family for years, killing someone every now and then. In recent years, he has been acting more ferociously, going to more extreme lengths. Even Fletcher Lawson was one of his men. It's safe to say that the Dark Lord is not only a thorn in my father's side but also a constant pain in my family's ass. The reason my parents decided to marry me off to the Grant family was to ensure my safety, as well as borrow their power to deal with the Dark Lord." Understanding immediately dawned on Dustin. "So, as long as we get rid of the Dark Lord, your dad might give in?" "Yep." Nasha nodded. "Without the Dark Lord, Our family has nothing to fear anymore. Where's the Dark Lord? I'll get rid of him. Dustin's eyes turned murderous. Things wouldn't have turned out this way if anyone knew where he is. Natasha shook her head, smiling bitterly. He's so well hidden, I don't even know what he looks like. That's going to be tricky. Dustin frowned. It was going to take some time to find someone whose identity and looks were both a well-kept secret. Since dealing with the Dark Lord is impossible, we can only think of a plan to make the Grant family annul the agreement first. Natasha's tone turned sharp. Knowing Tyler Grant, he can't bear it if anything is tainted. Tomorrow, when they send the gifts over, I'll tell him that I'm already yours. With his pride, there's no way he'll accept that. He might even annul our engagement on the spot. Are you sure it'll work? Dustin asked, unsure. It's worth a shot. Natasha grinned mischievously. No matter what, I'll be kicking up a fuss tomorrow. Worse come to worst, I'll just use my trump card. That way, the Grant family would never accept a daughter-in-law like me. What trump card? Dustin's eyes twinkled. That's a secret for now. You'll find out tomorrow. Natasha teased. After all, it's a trump card. She wouldn't reveal it so easily unless absolutely necessary.